Okay, this is part two of the video lecture on theoretical frameworks. Last time we dealt with four of the classic sociologists who had some things to say related to media and institutions. Now let's talk about social constructionism, which I've described as the guiding theoretical lens for this class. But I hope you can see how these ideas are all sort of tied together. Constructionism is and I say constructionism for short, social constructionism, is the primary language that I'll use in this class because it acts as a bridge kind of between the old school sociologists we just learned about and the other grand theoretical ideas we'll deal with next. So as such, you can consider constructionism to be a mid-level theoretical orientation, or we would say meso-level, that in part emphasizes individual interactions as laying the groundwork for any culture, but it also ties some macro or institutional level analysis and ideas to understanding media and social structure more generally. Constructionism means different things to different disciplines, but from a sociological standpoint, all we're really saying is that in every aspect of social life, including norms, values, beliefs, ideologies, or with our social institutions themselves, we construct our social reality, and we do this by interacting as social agents within this milieu. A simpler version of constructionism is simply this: perceived reality is reality for all intents and purposes in our subjective experienced lives, anyway. And it takes a while to grasp that, but it makes some sense here. One really great and short video clip that explains most of these basics comes from the Khan Academy. So I thought we'd watch it here really quick and wrap up this discussion on constructionism.
I'm sure everyone has thought at some time, is this real? But the important question is what makes something real? Most of the time, the things we experience in this world are just constructs. We have opinions about everything, and we experience the world through that lens. Social constructionism is a theory that knowledge and many aspects of the world around us are not real in and of themselves. They only exist because we give them reality through social agreements. Things like nations, books, even money don't exist in the absence of human society. Nations are groups of people who happen to share a language or history. Books are paper with scribbles. And money is just pieces of paper and metal that have no value other than what we have assigned them. The concept of the self can be considered a social construct too. Our identity is created by interactions with other people and our reactions to the expectations of society. There are two threads of social constructionism: the weak and the strong. Weak social constructionism proposes that social constructs are dependent on brute facts, which are the most basic and fundamental and don't rely on any other facts. Brute facts are kind of difficult to understand because it is so strange to think about something that can't be explained by something else. So, for example, take the computer screen you're looking at. Your screen works because of changing voltages and bits of metal, which can be explained by movements of subatomic particles, which are made from quarks, so on and so forth. None of those are brute facts. The brute fact is what explains quarks, or what explains the explanation of quarks. Those brute facts are separate from institutional facts, which are created by social conventions and do rely on other facts. So, for example, money depends on the paper that we have given value. Strong social constructionism, on the other hand, states that the whole of reality is dependent on language and social habits, that all knowledge is a social construct, and that there are no brute facts. So it would say that we created the idea of quarks and everything we use to explain it. There are no facts that just exist. The main criticism to social constructionism is that it doesn't consider the effect of natural phenomenon on society, and at least for strong social constructionism, it even has difficulty explaining those phenomena because they don't depend on human speech or action. Strong social constructionism only explains reality through the thoughts of humans, not by using fundamental brute facts.
So that's a pretty good overview. But there's one element of constructionism I think they left out, and it's important for this class. So let's talk about it. It's also missing from this Wikipedia definition, but there's some other good information there about it with some names attached to constructionism. I'm referring to what social constructionists call claims making. You should make a note of that. Claims dash making, or the claims making process. And I've written some verbiage down here below in this PowerPoint that you can see that I'm going to talk about for a second here. The claims making process, which is normally presented as a list of events that take place that establish an idea or a claim in the broader social arena as legitimate, are given. So they speak of the legitimization of claims. That's part of their language, the legitimization of claims, and how those claims are successfully established as mainstream social truths, or at least what Emil Durkheim called social facts, which are basically truths established in the culture, in the norms, values, and beliefs of the society, regardless of their objective truth. To be established, constructionists contend that it works best like this. And here's my 1, 2, 3 bullet point list. And you can see it here. I won't read it word for word, but people basically create society through ongoing interactions. These creations of society come to be seen as objectively real, and groups emerge to support them and reify them and make them more legitimate. And then people internalize the norms, values, and beliefs and ideologies of their culture, thereby being influenced by their own creation. You think about Mead and what we covered in terms of the self, the me, the self, and identity. It'll make some further sense. That's the list from our textbook summary of constructionism, but I've seen others in the process that add further by adding beyond these 3 points, and you don't necessarily have to write this down, but just keep it in mind. If I could add a fourth, I would say groups established claims, once accepted and internalized by a society, are challenged by competing groups with competing social interests. Fifth, new claims are established and maintained. And finally, six, rinse and repeat. I'm just kidding, but the process is cyclical, and it goes through cycles of legitimizing claims, establishing them, and then those claims are challenged by other competing groups. And as Kurt Vonnegut said, so it goes. So from this vantage point of constructionism, we can examine certain features of our culture that we might otherwise look past, things like our attitudes about certain groups and our actions towards others, and how competing interests vie for legitimate space, social space. For example, I spent a lot of my time teaching criminology courses, one of my areas of expertise, and we often have conversations in these classes about police brutality, the very successful Black Lives Matter movement, and gun rights or gun control. If you look at something like the gun control debate in America, you can clearly see different groups of claims makers who are waging the war of words for legitimacy. On the one hand, you've got the NRA, which is the most powerful political lobby in Washington, who has trumpeted the idea that the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. I'm sure you've heard that expression. And who have gotten a lot of mileage out of that line, as it's been internalized along with a whole ideology surrounding gun rights by a large percentage of Americans. On the other hand, you have the public who are decidedly pro gun restrictions and who have other politicians calling out for reasonable restrictions and stronger background checks, especially for the mentally ill. So, who's winning the national debate in this claims making battle? It's hard to tell right now, but the important thing here is that you can see what's involved in establishing claims in a culture and why it matters. Or look at the Black Lives Matter movement and their successful creation of an international movement that draws attention to police brutality of African Americans and other people of color and widespread discrimination in the criminal justice system. Now, I'm tempted to drop some known facts and statistics to confirm that racial discrimination is alive and well among our police forces to sort of legitimize my claim. But all we need to do now is understand that the only reason we're even talking about racial discrimination in the criminal justice system is because of the successful movement's ability to rally the nation around a cause. This problem has been acknowledged by the vast majority of Americans, so you might say we created a new reality surrounding the criminal justice system. We constructed it. And these claims have been challenged by groups like Blue Lives Matter, who claim that we must protect the rights of police as much as we try to protect the lives of young African American men, since the job of police is a difficult one. In the word, and I'll just end by saying, and so it goes in this cycle of claims making. So I'll end this short review on constructionism with this final point. Constructionists have lots of published work on what specific strategies are more or less effective in this fight for legitimization of claims, but you can explore that on your own time if you want to dig a little deeper, because I got to move on. Finally, there are a couple cultural and or media theorists I need to introduce you to, some folks who have contributed some long-standing, tried and true ideas that resonate especially well today in this digital age of communication. So let's look at four of them. Let's take the first two, Stuart Hall and Antonio Gramsci, together by taking a moment to read the biographies of both. This is a good time to pause this video and read these biographies, and if you click on their names, you get some further information in a Wikipedia format, I think. Notice both Hall and Gramsci were concerned with hegemony. That's a key word. Hegemony, defined for our purposes as the social, cultural, or ideological influence exerted by a dominant group. Both viewed hegemony as destructive for an intellectually vibrant and free society, harmful because it snuffs out new, innovative, or creative ideas and solutions in a society where those in power act to control for their own political or economic advantage. If this perspective sounds like conflict theory or Karl Marx, it is because they were both influenced by Marx and identified themselves as conflict theorists in his wake. But what they've added to the constructionist perspective is a macro level or institutional critique of power and privilege and its role in shaping dominant cultural norms, values, and beliefs, which gives constructionists the ability to examine social dynamics beyond the social psychological level, from individual and small groups to the structural level, offering some institutional insights as well. Now, McLuhan and Postman below are different from these first two because, for one thing, they are contemporaries who introduced their respective ideas more recently, and for another, they are both strictly media theorists, not sociologists or philosophers or even cultural theorists, So they spent their careers studying media systems specifically and not on the broader issues of institutional inequality and power. Now, with McLuhan, you may have heard of this Canadian media theorist, if not by name, then by his seminal work summarized by his most popular phrase, "The medium is the message," the meaning of which has been a source of confusion for some, especially after his book was wrongly published, "The Medium is the Massage," suggesting media is like a rubdown, which he cleverly published anyway, drawing him lots more attention than he would have gotten otherwise, I think. The idea holds water nonetheless, and it's worth remembering, though. What he's saying here is simply that as a society, we should be more concerned with the way in which media is delivered than with the actual content of that media. So, for instance, he would argue that, I don't know, say text messaging or tweeting family and friends has very different and probably unintended consequences for interpersonal relationships than, say, a handwritten letter that you stamp and send via snail mail. What gets lost in a culture that communicates in spurts of 280 characters or less, anything? I don't know. Can enough emojis, can't even pronounce, can enough emojis be drawn to convey every human thought and emotion accurately? How are relationships of all kinds affected by this new medium, and in what ways? Actually, as I think about it, I realize this class affords another good example of the medium is the message. I developed this class to be offered as either a traditional live course that meets on campus or as a fully asynchronous online course where students work on their own and at their own pace, but in a shorter time period and without the benefit of the live lecture where we have sometimes engaging live discussions and debate, and where I can offer a lengthier explanation of concepts and ideas. And you think about it, do students even need a professor to interact with in a live class environment anymore? Or can they learn everything they need to know on their own with just a short recorded video lecture to help them integrate these ideas? Good question. Consider also how internet technologies have changed students prior to taking this course in either format. Recent research tells us professors that we only have about 12 minutes to convey information because student attention spans have shrunk to the point that they lose interest and will tune out after that. That's why I try and keep these video lectures shorter than 15 minutes. I said I tried. Because I can't hold you hostage in a room for an hour and 15 minutes twice a week. And even when I can, I see students regularly looking down at their cell phones or laptops, clearly not paying attention. When this first started happening a number of years ago, I was personally offended and thought it was my fault because I couldn't capture your attention for more than 15 minutes. But I now understand that millennials and this new generation born after 2000, generation that has yet to be named, I've heard Generation Z, but I don't think that's going to stick. They've been raised, and most probably you have been raised, to learn in such short spurts and with such a multitude of distractions as we multitask. Because that's the way we have experienced the world since day one. That's the way you've experienced the world. So as professors, we've had to adapt to that for better or for worse, right? So these are a few examples to illustrate McLuhan's basic point that the first type or form that the media is delivered in can affect how it is received by its audience, that it can alter its meaning, and that over time it can reshape society entirely. So as you read McLuhan's stuff this week, pay attention to the historical examples he gives to make this point. He talks about the telegraph, the phone, and the internet, for example. Think about how you communicate daily and how the medium you use to do it has affected your brain, the type and quality of your relationships, for better or for worse, in different areas of your life, and how the digital age and technology itself has transformed the communication landscape we all live in. You'll see a couple articles about McLuhan in our learning material that give a more complete synopsis of his work, and you should take a moment to watch the video clip provided on this PowerPoint if you haven't already. And finally, our American boy, Neil Postman. Neil Postman was an American media theorist who offered another revealing perspective on the mass media and television in particular, which was basically the idea that we can understand the underlying and destructive dynamics of television. We can understand them best by looking at the worst of what TV has to offer. Specifically, he points to the eroding and corrosive force of TV at its worst. You know, all those mindless celebrity and entertainment shows like American Idol or Real Housewives of Beverly Hills that exist only to dumb down a society, to distract us from real and more important social news of the day, so that we don't even know what's really important to know about in the world we live in, let alone know how to ask the right questions about those events. TV itself, as a dominant visual form of communication today, limits our ability to generate ideas to communicate outside of the visual spectrum of TV, as opposed to, say, writing and publishing ideas via the print media, which historically Postman also talks about. The PowerPoint video does a decent job of outlining his critical position on television as a medium, so be sure to take a look at that before you move on. Sadly, we don't have time to watch it together here. Remember, I've only got 12 minutes and I'm already over that time. But I do need to mention one last thing. In our required learning material, there are also 3 audiobook chapters I've asked you to listen to. This book is Postman's most recent. He died a few years back. And it deals more specifically with the subject of technology. It's his book entitled Technology. I'm sorry, it's Technopoly. Let me show you it real quick. So this is his book here. It's actually entitled Technopoly: The Surrender of Culture to Technology. And it's a timely examination of the accelerated era of technology we now live in and some of its unintended consequences. I've chosen 3 chapters that I think you'll find quite engaging, so it's worth the honestly hour and a half or so of listening time. 3 chapters at about a half hour each. So this is me encouraging you to listen to all of them and not to get distracted by society. And finally, if you have any questions about any of this, you can always email me and I'll give you some more detailed responses. Again, these videos are just a way to kind of frame what you're reading on your own time. So let me know how it goes. And if not, I'll see you next time.